Hello. Guess what? It's week 7. I know it's hard to believe, but this is really the last full week that we have. And so I'm hoping that you all have at least gotten a little bit out in the last 6 weeks. We're going to play Dodge the Sun today because it's 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and that's when the sun shines in there. So we're going to do the regular, do little housekeeping things. We have a little bit extra housekeeping things to do because here we are at the last week and a half, and so had to do some shuffling to get everything to fit in this 8-week session for you. But I think we are good to go on everything that you all have been doing. Let me mention that this is Monday. I am 2/3 of the way done with more than 2/3. I think I have 6 more of you all to finish your, maybe a few more than that. I have to look on the system to see. Of the ones that were turned in through the ASU portal. Then I have the other 3 that weren't turned in through there. So I have a few more of the Article 2 analyses. Your next one's not due until next week, Wednesday. So you will get these in plenty of time. I'd hope to have them done over the weekend, and then we went to this Mrs. Poorman and I went to this conference down at Hilton Head, and it was excellent. Learned some new things, and that's the whole idea of going to a communication conference, is that you learn something new. And actually went to a couple sessions about online classes, online teaching, and online learning. So that was kind of fascinating. And it was fun to know that I do some things right, and then not so fun to realize that I might be wanting to do some things a little differently in the future. But you'll get a chance to tell me that when you evaluate the course. You'll get a email from the university that asks you to evaluate the course. So let's first talk about what's left. All right, you turned in test number 3 last night. One of you didn't. I'm going to be wondering where that is. So you will get an email from me. It says, nothing there. So that one's done. Test number 4 will go up this Thursday. It is only 10 questions. All right, so it's shorter. It will be due not on Sunday, sorry. It will be due Tuesday night, and I'll say Tuesday night by midnight. It brings a closure to the material. It covers some of the things that we're talking about here today, and then at the beginning of next week, things about intercultural communication and then gender communication, which is what next week's chapters are about. We will have one more Watch Me, which will be next weekend. It will also go up Monday because I might be able to put it up earlier than that. I might do it at the end of this week and then put it up. I'm headed to my 50th high school reunion, so I'm kind of excited about that. But I actually can do that from there. I just have to take my laptop. So those are the things that are left for you to do. All right, and the daily forums. So that's the article analysis. Last article analysis is due on Wednesday at midnight of next week, not this week, next week. Yes, that's the day after classes are over for this first half session, but I add a little extra time in there, so you can turn them in when you're ready. I also am going to make available, and this will mean, all right, that you need to be listening to the Watch Me's because there's extra credit available. If you wish to do extra credit for up to 25 points, all right, only 20, that's all I'll give for it is 25 points, but that can make the difference between one grade and the next. Right. You may do a 4th article analysis, and I'll grade it by the same rubric, all right? but it will be the total. Let's say you got a B on it. I would take that 85 and divide it by 4, and that's how many points you would get. So if you wish to do a fourth article analysis, you may do one for extra credit. I will put up something on the As You Learn site about that, right? And if you're going to do that, that is also due by next Wednesday. You can do it whenever, but and that you will not load to the As You Learn site. You will email that to me separately. The reason is if I put it on the As You Learn site, it adds those points into the number of points. So that skews your being able to look and see what kind of grade you're getting. All right, so that's why I don't do it through the As You Learn site. So anyway, I think that's it on what you have left. Just, keeping up with the reading and the PowerPoints, and then the last test and the last article analysis. And then if you wish to, the extra credit speech teacher here, extra credit article analysis. Okay, if you have any questions about that, just email me and ask me, or pick up the phone and call me. I think one of you all probably tried to call while I was out of the office on Friday. Somebody from Charlotte was trying to call me. So anyway, I do want to say something about the article analyses that I'm grading. You need to read my markings on them. I think some of you all have just looked at the grades and said, oh, okay, I got a C, I got an A, I got an A minus, she took off some points, and you're not looking at what I wrote on the actual article analysis. The reason they take time and they're not done yet is because I do read them carefully. I do mark grammatical things. And so here are a number of things that I want you to pay attention to. All right. Biggest issue is citing your sources, right? Including the source is what I mean. 3 of you this time, and some the earlier time, turned in your papers to me with no source on it. And the directions are clear. We'll go back and look at the directions for the assignment. It says include a correct bibliographic citation at the end, all right? On your sources page, bibliography page, works cited page, all right? That's all I'm looking for on that page. And here's another thing some of you all are doing. I'm not asking you to go find outside sources, all right? That's just the one article. Some of you all are taking the sources that the article uses and then you include them in your bibliography. Can't do that, folks. That's a form of plagiarism, all right? If you want to quote something from somebody in that article, let's say Palmyra, that's just one of the ones, that's the sample one, cites somebody and you want to cite what that person said from their article, all right? Then you say so-and-so and so-and-so said, and you put the quote, right? Then you cite it in Palmieri et al. And the page number. Quotes must have page number citations. All right. That's in all bibliographic forms. All right. And if there is no page number, which there are in these articles because they come from actual books. I should show you what one looks like. That's I've got one right here because they gave us one at the conference this weekend. They come out of books like this. They're journals, all right? They're articles that are within a journal. There are page numbers there. You cite the page number that you took it from. If you've gone to a website to find something, which that won't be with these, all right? Well, actually, I say that might be. Because some of you all are using some of the sources that are published articles that come up on a page, just the HTML text. You use N period, P period, little n, little p, little n period, little p period. All right, stands for no page. All right. correct format also says you should count the paragraphs. I don't care about you counting the paragraphs. Just put NP for no page. Right? But a quote must have a page number citation. I can't tell you the number of times I have written that and repeated it to some of you all. Yes, I go back and open up. If I have a question about whether or not you're making the same mistakes, I go back and open up your earlier paper and say, look, I asked you, I marked this last time, which of course is why I'm saying, please read my comments, because it's clear some folks aren't reading the comments. Anyway, I don't need the web address when you put that citation there at the end of the paper. I don't need the web address. If you got to it through EBSCOhost and you put the EBSCOhost web address, it means absolutely zero, because you got to that source using your username and password. If I do anything like try to copy that and paste it, because it's not hot in the it's not a hot link in when I'm grading on the iPad, it's going to tell me forbidden, right? So don't put that there, all right? I don't care if the DOI is there. Some of y'all are putting that. That's fine. That's proper format to put that there, but I don't care if that's there or not. I want to know in case I have to go look for it. A lot of y'all are using the sample ones, which is great, right? But if you've gone to find another one, I have to be able to find it. And that's why I want you to make sure you use proper bibliographic format. Please proofread and use the writing directions handout that I have provided for you. I put things there because those are the things that I'm going to mark. All right? And so please do that. Don't start sentences with conjunctions. No contractions in formal writing. Those are the two main things that I marked that are clear in that writing handout. I want you to learn how to write formally, all right? And writing formally means no contractions, no starting sentences. I do mark prepositions at the end of a sentence also. It's not a biggie anymore. It's one of the changing rules that exists. Those are things that we do. Now, in your tests, by the way, I don't think I've seen anybody do this in one of their article analysis. But yes, I do mark me and so-and-so. That's improper grammar. And I think you all have known that since junior high school. You never say me and so-and-so. It's always the other person's name or names, and I or me. All right? We talked about this in the last Watch Me. I'm not going to do it again. So, but keep that in mind. You need to learn not to speak with that, all right, or write with that. Mostly where I've only seen that in tests. I think that's it. Oh, don't use the word prove. We have talked about this before. No prove, right? That we don't prove when we do studies. We confirm hypotheses, right? And the reason we don't use proof is because proof is absolute. It means 100%, right? And that's not what we have here, right? So use confirm. And then the last thing about the writing is y'all need to learn when to use a semicolon and not to use a semicolon. So go study that, look at that. But the bottom line is that if you use a semicolon, you have to have a full subject and predicate afterwards. Noun and a verb. Has to be a full sentence or phrase, with a noun and a verb in it. So if not, then you use the comma, or you can use a colon. But with the semicolon and a colon, right? What comes after that semicolon and after a colon has to flow out of the first half of the sentence. All right? I've asked a number of you all, many of you all, to read your papers out loud. You will hear some of those mistakes that are being made. So I'm sorry, we don't want you to graduate from Appalachian with a communication degree and have poor grammar. Or write poorly. So that's why we mark these things, and that's why we're picky about these things. So anyway, I think that's it on housekeeping things. So let's talk about the 3 chapters. There are only 3 chapters this week, and we'll begin those in 1 second. I have the wrong one open. Okay, chapter 31. This section is about intercultural communication, these 3 chapters. And so we talk, first of all, um, uh, in the general section about probably what I consider, and I teach the class that we teach in intercultural communication. We talk about Hofstede, Hofstede, uh, page 389 in your textbook is where you'll see the spelling of that. Hofstede's theories are the most commonly known ones, those in Hall's, which we'll talk about both of those. But they're listed there on page 389, and you'll see those. We talk about power distance. How comfortable are you with people having power over you? All right. Some cultures are fine about it. Some cultures are not, as in the United States. Now, we don't have the lowest power distance, right, because it's all continuum, high power distance, low power distance, right? And so what you've got is that people who are comfortable with people having power over them are what we call high power distance. I think I mixed those up. And so Americans are low, Japanese are medium, more tribal cultures are more high power distance. But it's just looks at how power is distributed in a culture. Masculinity versus femininity. Again, a continuum. In the middle is androgyny, both masculine and feminine. Keep in mind that sex and gender are 2 separate concepts, and we'll talk more about that in the next section at the beginning of next week, which is gender communication. And the reason that we define those differently is because gender is sociological, psychological, anthropological, and sex is biological, male, female. Gender is masculine, feminine, and then in the middle is androgyny. So some cultures are more masculine, they're more assertive, they're more competitive, they're more achievement oriented, and then some are more feminine, more nurturing, more caregiving for everybody, all right? Uncertainty avoidance is one that I have to deal a lot with when I take the students to Poland, because they have high uncertainty avoidance in Poland. And what uncertainty deals with, uncertainty avoidance deals with, a culture is threatened by any ambiguity. So they don't want any uncertainty. So they have all kinds of little unwritten rules and rules that you follow by and protocol that you follow. We in the United States do not have a high uncertainty avoidance. Other cultures do, right? Japan does, Poland does, but those are things that, and so there are unwritten rules. You do things the way they do it, and don't mess up. So, and then individualism versus collectivism. The United States, and by the way, all of these are continuums. Individualism at one end, collectivism at the other. The United States is the most individualistic culture in the world. They worry about looking out for themselves and their immediate family only. More collectivistic cultures look out for the whole culture, all right? So that if you went to Japan to work, who is far more, or Guatemala, which is the most collectivistic culture in the world, you went there to work and you have a collectivistic approach to you're individualistic, and you go to Guatemala and they're collectivistic, you will have trouble, because you will be worrying about yourself and not everybody else in that culture. All right. I always give the example when we talk about this that you can tell how different we are. And if we have foreign students that come from more collectivistic cultures and they're in our classroom and we assign some group work, it just stands out like a sore thumb. Because if we were in Japan and I assigned a group project, that group would work together and be together and take care of everything together. Guess what we do? We do that. We assign a project for a group to do. A lot of y'all have this at work, and you split up the tasks. You do this, you do that, you do the other thing. all right? And so people who come from collectivistic cultures don't get that. Same thing for you, though. If you go to a culture where they're collectivistic and you get put in a group setting, right, and you want to split the tasks, you have a tough time dealing with the fact that everybody wants to work together, wants to work collectively. So that's always a big cultural issue that people pay attention to. In fact, in the textbook, it will tell you that most people agree that individualism versus collectivism is probably the most crucial one of these factors. Hall adds to Hofstede by talking about high context and low context. And again, it's continuum. And what that refers to is how important is the context of the situation to understand what's going on. So countries that are high context cultures, you have to understand the context of the situation to understand some things. So there's far more things like more nonverbal communication, more understanding the unwritten rules and so on and so forth. Whereas low context cultures, everything is just explained. My explaining these to you right now is because we're low context. All right, so yeah, we would say, well, you get it, you understand. So, and then there's also an issue that Hall added about being direct or indirect. We have a tendency to be direct unless we think it's going to offend someone. All right, and so we'll say things, somebody will ask a question and we'll say, we don't want to offend somebody, so we'll say, well, it's okay, and smile. So anyway, those are just some of the general issues about intercultural communication in the opening to this section. Chapter 31 is Howard Giles's theory, and what Giles, and I had heard a paper about accommodation theory. It's called communication accommodation theory. I heard a paper at this conference we went to this weekend that talked about communication accommodation theory. And you all have talked about this since the beginning of this class, all right? And that is that, textbook definition is the constant movement toward or away from others by changing your communicative behavior. It's trying to accommodate your communication to fit the situation. And we do it, folks. Some of you all don't like it. You mentioned that, early on in some of the forum posts, it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't particularly care for, why do we change how we're talking to someone? Why do I talk more politely to someone who I think might have some power over me? It's called communication accommodation, all right? If you go to a foreign culture and they're more low context, all right, or actually we're low context, so let's do it the other way. You go to a culture that's more high context, you're going to find that your nonverbals are going to be looked at a whole lot more than they might be in our culture, all right? So you accommodate that. If somebody says something to you and you raise your eyebrows, all right, it's going to send the message to the other person. Well, in our culture it does too, but not as strongly as it does in high context cultures. It can be all kinds of accommodation. It can be because you're in a foreign culture. When I take the students to Poland, I speak more Polish. All right. I've accommodated. I've learned some of that. And that's because the first year I went, I knew nothing but please and thank you and where's the bathroom. All right. So I taught myself more. I'm self-taught. But that's a form of communication accommodation. And we do that. Convergence means that you converge towards how they communicate. Divergence means that you diverge away from how they do it. There are some examples in the textbook about how if you're talking to someone who's hearing impaired, how you might converge with that person. You might speak louder, etc. And then diverging would mean that you would accentuate the differences between you and another person. There are a bunch of different types of ways that we do that. We self-handicap. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't speak, in fact, every time I speak Polish, and I speak decent Polish, I've been told it before, my pronunciation is correct and all that. Always, when I go in and say, czy mówi pan po angielsku, which means do you speak English? And if they say yes, I'm fine, and I speak. Actually, it's funny because when they say yes, I still speak in Polish when I want to get something. But if they say no, I'll go, I can do this. And then I'll go, trochę mówię po polsku, which just means I speak a little Polish. And so that self-handicapping, so they know that I'm going to be able to do this maybe, and if not, I could use a little help. Of course, now Google Translate helps a whole lot more with that. I do want to point out about over accommodation. How many of you have spoken to someone before or seen someone speaking to somebody before where they try to over accommodate? It comes across as being demeaning, patronizing. So you slow down so slow. Or my mother, she passed away when she was 86, but she had never lost any of her hearing ability. And people would yell because she was old. It's like, no, you got to find out. Don't over accommodate unless you know that person has some hearing issues. And you'll have different motivations for whether you converge or diverge. And the biggest one is that desire for social approval will cause you to converge, right? Because you'll get a positive response. So we talk about your social identity. If you don't want to give up your own social identity, you're more likely to diverge. All right, it's like, well, I don't give up that I'm American and this is how I want to do this, and I'm in a foreign culture. So I have some things with some of the students that I travel with because they're pretty good about speaking, please and thank you. I teach them a few words when we go over there, but they don't want to give up that American identity. So while we're in Poland. Another concept that comes into play here is attribution theory, about the way you attribute how, this is why they communicate that way. This is why they do this way. So that becomes a part of it, a part of the whole accommodation theory. You attribute the things people do. And so it's kind of fun to look at that. How many of you have communication accommodated before? Pretty much here, because it's in the intercultural communication section, we're talking about in foreign cultures, but you do it, interethnicities, you go into different groups, interracial, just all kinds of ways that we communication accommodate. If you speak a certain dialect, do you change that when you go into a different culture than your own? That's called a communication accommodation. Chapter 32 deals with face negotiation theory, and you all have probably heard this before, but our culture only worries about our face. Collectivistic cultures worry about everybody's face, and face is just the projected image of oneself in a relational situation. So who am I is what this deals with. And so we talk more about in the United States, because we're individualistic, we're worried about ourselves, our own face, our own self-image. And collectivistic cultures, again, are more worried about everybody's face. They worry about their own, but they worry about everybody in the collectivity. So face work, is really specific to verbal and nonverbal messages that help people either maintain their face or restore face. And we talk about embarrassment of people, especially because that's a biggie when we look at it. If you'll, when you go to the textbook, it says 405, but I don't think that's the page because I think I have the wrong page numbers on the others. Yeah, it's up there. There's a grid, special techniques for third-party mediation. So you want to look at that. That's just, how we approach the concept of face work in the United States and in society. And again, what's in it for me is the most common way that we do it in the United States because we're individualistic. Okay. And so you'll see a good discussion about how we, in the United States, because we're individualistic, approach this. And you'll see a discussion of a concept called self-construal, which it deals with self-image, the degree to which people conceive of themselves as relatively autonomous. This is who I am, not who I'm connected to. And that's how we do that in the United States. There are lots of issues that we worry about. Even down to the clothes you put on, face concern, regards for your own face. But we also talk in terms of face concern. Who are you concerned about? The other people that are in the conversation with you, their face. You hear it a lot about Chinese culture and Japanese culture because the Far Eastern cultures are more concerned with other people's face than we are. So the students that study abroad in China have to learn that before they go about. These are issues that you don't do. Then if you do something to damage face, somebody's self-image or somebody's self-construal, right? You go about restoring that face. And you've done that before. You try to make somebody whose face has been hit, all right? And again, these aren't literal face. It's a self-image that something has happened. You help them restore face. All of us have done that for someone before. And then face giving, which means here's a positive thing about you so that you feel better about yourself. Or it can be in collectivistic cultures, that can be about the whole culture. So, the thing with the biggest discussion in this chapter is about conflict management due to face concerns. How do you take care of a conflict? Well, some people avoid. We've talked about this before in an earlier chapter about conflict. All right. And so we talk about, do you avoid? Do you oblige? Do you compromise? Do you dominate? And each of these has some issues that are concerned with, do I pay attention to the other person's face that I'm in this conflict with? This also talks some about expressing your emotions, emotional expression. Venting, demeaning other people is one of the examples they use in the textbook. And then passive aggressiveness. Someone was just passive aggressive to me this morning. I was like, don't do that. In America, we don't like passive aggressiveness, right? And so don't do that to me. Third-party help, bringing somebody else in to help you, because if you can't take care of it on your own, then you bring in outside people. So you want to look at that. Other things that affect this, the face issue, is power distance. Does somebody have the power to control your face? All right. And if they do, how does that happen? In the United States, just the boss have the ability to control how you see yourself or how others see you. And the biggest issue here is, what do you do? If you have knowledge of this and you know about a culture you're going into that is more concerned about group face than individual face, then you deal with that. Being mindful, all right? Mindfulness, recognizing that things are not always what they seem, and then having the ability to interact with other people, all right? And this is really just a theory that says, learn to deal with people from other cultures or cultures different than our own, than how we deal with our own, all right? How we deal with our own culture. So chapter 33 has to do with speech codes, and this ties back to communication accommodation, actually. This is Jerry Philipson's theory. And by the way, Philipson said the best way to study this was through ethnography. A number of y'all have said that you like that approach to studying some of these communication theories. What we talk about when we talk about doing ethnography, again, is somebody who goes in and watches and listens and records communicative conduct in its natural setting. And a number of y'all have said you wouldn't mind studying something that way. And even your workplace, some of you all have said. So it's not, this is an interpretive approach, more qualitative approach to studying how people communicate. But when we talk about looking at speech codes, what we're talking about is a socially constructed system of terms, meanings, premises, and rules pertaining to communicative conduct. All right, and so what type of speech code? Now, for example, if you were in my seated class, and I ask you not to do it in your posts also, if you were in my seated class, I have a class rule. Don't curse in here. I don't curse in the classroom. I curse. I don't curse in the classroom. All right. Usually in my car when I'm driving and somebody has ticked me off, and by myself. But the thing is that that's a speech code for me. And the reason I say that is that, number one, you have no earthly idea who you might offend using foul language. The other thing is there's no reason to. It says something about you if that's all you can use. Right, and it says something about intelligence, although somebody brought up in my nonverbal class the other day that they had read this article that said it shows that you're smarter if you curse. It's like, well, I don't think so. You're not going to persuade me on that one. But what sorts of rules and premises? Those of you with children, what sorts of things do you teach your children? My lecture a few minutes ago about get that me and so out of your spoken grammar and your written grammar. All right, those are issues of speech code. All right, so yeah, it has to do with grammar, but it also has to do with communicative style and your communication conduct. Just a good little example in there. Make sure you look at it about the Teamsters in Teamsterville. They use their own speech to create a community. We see that all the time, especially in ethnic groups. That if you have an ethnic group that's together, they may have a language style that's their own, and shortened terms and shortened grammar. So there are some, textbook refers to them as general propositions about speech code. They are distinct. All right, they're the distinctness, the multiplicity, which means there are many, many speech codes, and that's why you have to learn to communication accommodate, because there's so many. All right, the substance, what's in what you're saying. All right, psychologically, sociologically, rhetorically. These things are part of the speech code. What's the rhetoric? What's the humor that people use? How do you deal with the dignity of others in the speech that you use? Interpretation of that speech code, right, is number 4. And the 5th one is called the site of speech codes, and what that refers to are the actual terms, rules, and premises that speech code will use. And they talk about a totemizing, like totem pole, totemizing ritual that says this builds on this. All right, this is how we do it, a careful performance of a structured sequence. If you go back to the interpersonal theory that we talked about a long time ago, 7 weeks, right? What you get are the sequence, the punctuation of punctuated events. It talked about it back in the interpersonal theory. So that becomes a part of this also. And communication rituals that cultures follow. And some of you all have pointed out about that a number of times, either in tests or forum posts, about when somebody says, hello, how are you doing? The totemizing ritual is that somebody answers, fine, how about you? All right, and then they walk away and not listen to y'all. See, I do read what y'all write. So. And then the last issue about speech codes, the 6th proposition, is that the force of speech codes, how artful, people's language choices. How maybe someone who just really knows how to communicate culturally, it just sounds good to listen to them. So that would make up the force of what they're talking about. One of the things that Phillipson said was the only way to really study this was to study the performance of speech codes. So that's why ethnography applies here. The critique on this one, by the way, is that a lot of, which you probably can tell, is that most critics believe that Phillipson's theory is far too generalized. Because, everybody has a speech code. It doesn't give you enough specifics to go in and pick that apart. But it is true. Everybody has a speech code, including you all and including me. So anyway, those are the 3 chapters for this week. I hope you have a great week. Please remember what's going on between now and the end of the session, which will be test 4 will go up Thursday around noontime. All right. Actually, it'll go up a little earlier because I'm headed to my reunion, and I'll probably do that before I get on the road. So it'll probably be around 10 in the morning. It'll go up. Due on the following Tuesday at midnight, not Sunday at 5 like usual. All right. Article number 3, and you'll have article number 2 back, those of you that are still waiting. All right. A lot of y'all have it back already. It's due Wednesday, the 9th, all right, at midnight. All right. Also, if you're going to do the extra credit article analysis, it is due Wednesday at midnight as well. Okay. And by the way, if you have an A average, please don't do the article analysis. All right. There's no reason to. And what it does is just put extra grading on me, which, as you know, we've had a little trouble keeping up with. That's what happens when they increase the size of the cohort. But I like y'all, so I'm glad we have all 32 of you. So anyway, have a great week. I will talk to you later over the weekend again, and that will be our last Watch Me. Bye.